There's a lot of things where it's not a cut and dry build versus buy, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So usually platform components are a buy, which means you end up like messaging. Nobody is writing message.
Exactly.
Nobody is writing a database. I mean, nobody is writing an API gateway, right? So what we do is we build enough to be able to swap between one messaging infrastructure and another. So for example, I inherited OSK, open source Kafka, but we built a layer so that we could then go to a managed service provided to us by Confluent, right? That's a good example of abstracting away the underlying so I could change the underlying piece without the application knowing what is going on. And we did that. We did that. We started with OSK and then we swapped it out for Confluent as an example. Using managed services where it's really complex, and it's the same example, right? Kafka is inherently hard to manage. It's not an easy set of things to like just manage on your own, right? Let the experts do it. Let the experts do it, right? So invest in managed components and manage componentry as much as possible. And when I say manage, I would say like things like authentication. So we were using Okta for our authentication. They're the industry leaders. I mean, let them do it. I mean, there's no sense in us building authentication and logging and preventing against DDoS attacks and whatever else, right? That's what they're really, really good at. So that's one aspect of the buy. The second aspect is like your own at the other end of this of the pendulum and the spectrum is your IP, your intellectual property, right? So whatever you bring to the table, threat protection is what we were doing at McAfee. That's our bread and butter. So that's obviously a build, right? So the business logic behind that was obviously a build, right? Whatever we needed to do, detecting it, protecting you, telling you what actions to take, the whole 9 years. And those were all things that we would build. And there's this little gray area in between where we build and we bought, right? So observability falls smack dab in that. So we're a big OpenTel shop, but at the same time, we would use FluentBit and FluentD to be able to hook. So while one part of it would get fed into, Loki, Tempo, and Prometheus, the other part, we would just fork that traffic and push it to, say, CloudWatch or push it to whatever else, right? So we could do it, and we could control how much went into the managed service so that we could control costs. At the same time, we would use that as like the starting point for us to then look at the more detailed information in Loki and doing your more detailed analysis. So we were able to have like this nice hybrid of the two worlds where you would use the managed service, and CloudWatch is fantastic, right? But for certain things, it made more sense for us to fall back on Loki and Tempo for that matter for tracing. So we would do that. So having that, like the application is again blissfully unaware you're doing this. Under the hood, we are forking that traffic and then sending some of it two ways: one to our own OpenTel infrastructure, another to monitoring in like a managed monitoring service.